Gittin Daf we'll begin with the Mishnah at the beginning of the 9th and final parak of the Masechta. This discusses a situation where the get was given not completely. It is not allowed to do a complete gerushin, only a partial gerushin. The question is, does something like that work? So the Mishnah will introduce a machlekes, and the Gemara will discuss what exactly is the case of that machlekes, and then what the sources of the machlokes are, and a number of other questions which are related. So let's begin. The Mishnah discusses somebody who divorces his wife, and at the time he's giving her the get, he says, you are now permitted to everyone, but this guy, but a certain individual. And the word that the Mishnah uses here is Ella. Ella Leplani, and that's going to be important. So what's the halacha here? So it's Machagis Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer says it's a valid divorce. She's divorced from him. And the Chachamim say it is an invalid divorce. She's still married to him and has absolutely no validity at all. How can you redo it? Has to take the get back from her and give it to her again and say, no, you're permitted actually to everybody. It's a complete gerushin. Now, if it was written that way into the get, then there's no solution. Even you can't just erase that line out of the get. You need a new get. Now, the Gemara wants to know, what does the word Elah mean? When we say when he says to her, she is divorced from him and permitted to everyone but this person. So Elah means except for that person, meaning that the gerushin itself, the divorce, is only applied as far as relative to everyone else, but as far as this one person that he's singling out, she is not divorced from her husband relative to him. Therefore, the gerushin itself is incomplete. Or he's saying, no, the gerushin is complete. She's fully divorced from him. It's just contingent. There's a tanai that she not marry this one guy. If she goes and marry this one guy, then the entire gerushin is canceled retroactively. So in effect, it's the same thing. She can't marry him. But the gerushin is complete. There is no limiting factor in the gerushin itself. It just has a contingency clause. So the Gemara says the first one is far less likely to actually work because it's the gerushin itself is incomplete. Who says there's a concept of a partial divorce? So the Gemara says it's much more likely that would be usser and the get would be no good than to say that if it was a tenai. So what is the case of the Machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer, and the Chachamim? Is the Machlokes in the first case where it's an incomplete divorce, but in the case of a tenai, everyone agrees that that's good, even the Chachamim agree that that is valid? Or is Machlokes in that case, and in the first case, where it's a partial divorce, even Rabbi Eliezer would agree that it's no good? So Gemara says, well, let's examine if we could find a source in a different Mishnah as to what the word Ella means. Gemara says there's a Mishnah that talks about taras on houses, nige vatim, and it says kol batim and tamim b'negayim, all houses become tamei through taras. Ella shall avdi kichavim, but for that of a guy. What does Ella here mean? Does it mean on the condition that a house of a guy becomes tamei? Obviously, that's not true. There's no reason that the house of a Jew becoming tamei with taras should be conditioned on the house of a guy not becoming taras. And second of all, a house of a guy can never become tamei through taras because the Torah specifically says, "V'nasati negat taras beveis eres achuzaschem." Only in houses which are in your property do the parsha of taras apply. So there, clearly, the word Ella means chutz. It means to say that any house could have taras and become tamei with it, except for a house of a guy. So clearly, the word Ella means chutz, and therefore our Mishnah, which uses the word Ella, is clearly talking about the first case where the divorce has an exception to it itself. That's where there's a machlokes. However, in the case where there's a tanai, even the Rabbanan would agree that that's good. So the Gemara says that's shot in our Mishnah. However, there's a brayso where Rabbi Yehuda brings this machlokes, and he says explicitly that the machlokes is in the case of the tanai, and the implication is that in a case like our Mishnah, which he's obviously arguing with, it would be no good, and even Rabbi Eliezer would agree that it's no good. Okay. Next, the Gemara wants to know, what is the reasoning? What is the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer? What is the reasoning of the Chachamim? So in this second explanation that the machlokes is about the case of a tanai, so Rabbi Eliezer says simply, it's a tanai. You can make whatever tanai you want, and if he makes a tanai that you don't marry someone, that's a tanai that he made. There's no problem with that. Chachamim say, no, that's true, but this tanai is in effect limiting the power of the get, even though it's not how it's phrased, it's not how it's structured, that's what it's doing, and therefore it's no good. Now, if you're talking about where it's chutz, where he literally even said that divorce has an exception to it, what would Rabbi Eliezer's reasoning be there? So Rabbi Yanai says, in the name of Zakin Echad, which usually refers to Eliyahu Hanavi, that it is a pasuk. He is a limud from a pasuk. It says that she leaves his house and she goes and she marries to someone else. So that means even if she's only permitted to one other person, there's only an ish acher, there's only one other person that she can go to, that's still a divorce. So even if there's an exception for everybody in the world, there's only one person whom she becomes permitted to, that's still good. Now the Rabbanan say, no, you're not reading that right. When it says ish acher, it means to any man, to this person or that person, any one man, any person that is who she is permitted to go forward from here. Now, that's the Gemara's first pshat, but it's Gzeres HaKosav of a pasuk. Now, Rabbi Yochanan has another pshat. He also has Gzeres HaKosav from a pasuk, but from a different one. It says, V'isha grusha me'isha lo yikachu. Talking about Kehanim, a woman divorced from her husband. So the Gemara says, even if all the divorce does is to separate her from her husband, but it does not permit her to anybody, she's just grusha me'isha, divorce from her husband, that's still a valid divorce. So that's another Gzeres HaKosav possibility that Rabbi Eliezer would be learning from. And again, the Rabbanan would say that's talking about Kehanim. And that's not talking about what's a valid divorce or not. That's talking about the halakha of when a Kohen becomes usher to marry a woman. So yeah, Kehanim have more restrictive halachos. Even a get, which is a pasul get, would still pasul her for Kehanim. So that is a correct way of defining how a woman becomes usher to Kehanim. It is not a correct way of defining how she actually has a valid divorce. All right, now the Gemara has a question. What about Kedushin? Let's say somebody marries a woman and he says, you are Mekudesh to me, you're usher and everybody else in the world, except for one person, you're not usher to that person. Is that a valid Kedushin or not? Now, obviously, it's not a proper marriage, but does that make that she is usher to everybody else in the world? Is there chalais in this kedushin to usher her on at least everybody else except for that one person that he said? So the Gemara says this is a question that could apply both in Rabbi Eliezer Shita and in the Rabbanan Shita. Rabbi Eliezer Shita, where he had a pasuk that this works by Gerishin, so maybe that's only by Gerishin where he has the pasuk. But if you want to do a kedushin is a kinyan that has to be a full and complete kinyan. Or maybe you could learn from Gittin to Kedushin, we have a hekesh between the two. It says V'yatza v'haisa v'yatza miyabesa v'haisa l'shachar, which always connects the halachos of Gittin with Kedushin. Now in the Rabbanan you could have the same shaila. As the Rabbanan said, it doesn't work. That could be because get has to affect a krisis. Krisis is a separation, has to cut between them. If there's still a connection between the two, she's still restricted based on what he said. That's not a complete separation. But for a kinyan, as long as a kinyan of any sort works. So maybe that's fine. Or perhaps again, we do have the hekesh between the two, and the same halacha would apply. So Gemara says that he himself answered that you say v'yatzav v'haisa, and both of them, both Rabbanan and Rabbi Eliezer, would have the same shita by Gittin that they had by Kedushin. They would have the same thing. Now, Gemara has another question. If you want to say, like we said from Rabbi Abba, like we said that it applies by Kedushin, you can have a partial Kedushin. So what would be the halacha in the following scenario? We have a scenario of someone falling to Yibum from two brothers, that she falls to Yibum to Levi from both her marriage to Levi's brother Reuven and her marriage to Levi's brother Shimon. So how could that be? So in Yivamus we discussed that she had a deraisa marriage to Reuven and she had a derabanan marriage to Shimon. And that's a sugya over there. But here, the Gemara has another possible scenario. Let's say she marries Reuven with a kedushin to everyone except Shimon. And then she goes and marries Shimon with a kedushin to everyone except Reuven. So Reuven's kedushin accepted Shimon. Shimon's kedushin accepts Reuven. So is this called Eishes Shnei Mesim? Is this called a woman of two husbands who's falling to Yibum from both of them, which we said that there's no such Yibum? So Gemara says no, because the second kedushin here is useless, because the second kedushin does not add any iser on anybody in the world. Reuven's kedushin aser the entire world except for Shimon. Shimon's kedushin also asers everyone in the world except for Shimon and Reuven. So it doesn't change anything. And therefore it has no effect, and therefore she is not called Eishes Shnei Mesim. However, what would be a case that works if the same thing, except instead of Shimon saying that he's Makadisher to everyone except Ruvain, Shimon does a regular complete Kiddushin. Now at least it adds something. It adds an Isser on Ruvain, who she was mother to before for her Kiddushin. So that case would be an Esher Shnei Mesim, and if they both died and now she felt even to Levi, that would be Esher Shnei Mesim, and it would not count at all. All right, now the Gemara has a number of other questions here. Abaye asks a series. What if he says you are mutter? He gives her a divorce, a get, and she says you are mutter to everyone except for Ruvain and Shimon. And then he adds, and he says to Reuben and to Shimon. So what was he saying? He was switching and saying, you know what? You're really mutter to everyone in the world, including Reuben and Shimon, which is what she needs. Or is he switching, completely reversing it? And he's saying, you know what? You're usher to everyone. You're mutter to Reuben and Shimon. That was the first round. He's switching where he had first. He said, "You are mutter to everyone, and you're staying usher to Reuben and Shimon." Now he said, "You know what? The opposite. You're gonna be usher to everyone and mutter only to Reuben and Shimon." So how do we understand that? Now, if you want to say that he means that she's usher, that she's mutter to everyone, what if she just says to Reuben? What if he when he changed his mind, he says to Reuben? Is he saying to everyone and to Reuven, but Shimon not? Or he means Reuven and Shimon, just the reason he mentioned Reuven is because Reuven's the one he mentioned first before anyway. Or, another question, what if he just says to Shimon? Again, did he mean Reuven and Shimon? And the only reason that he said Shimon is because that was the last one he was just talking about most recently? Or is he referring only to Shimon? The last question is, what if he says even to Shimon? What does he mean? You're mutter to everyone, even Reuven and even Shimon, which I mentioned Reuven before. Now I'm saying even, not only are you now mutter to Reuven, but even to Shimon. Or is he saying you're mutter to everyone and even Shimon, but he's leaving Reuven out? How would we understand any of these things? So in all these four, the Gemara says, Teku, the question stands. We don't have a resolution.